Behind the Built Environment, the podcast from BESA, the UK's leading trade body for the building engineering services sector.
Hello, I'm David Frise, Chief Executive of BESA. Welcome to Behind the Built Environment, the podcast where I delve into the major issues facing our industry through in-depth conversations with key industry leaders. Join us as we explore the trends, challenges and innovations shaping the future of the built environment. And today, our guest is Stephen Boyd.
Good morning.
Good morning, Stephen. Stephen Boyd has worked in property and infrastructure for over 30 years, leading on major change programs and on the management of complex national and international estates. As a former head of the British Army estate and at one time responsible for Camp Bastion in Afghanistan, and a former chief executive of the Government Property Agency, he has a hands-on experience of asset management and the maintenance of complex and varied portfolios. An engineer by training, he has a long-term commitment to improving efficiency in the built environment, especially through supply chain collaboration and using data to enable better and faster decisions. He now balances his time between non-executive, strategic advisory and consultancy roles. So welcome, Stephen, again.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us
today. It's amazing
today.
what you can get with an internet scrape, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed. Can we kick off? And we're going to come to the five short questions in a second, but can we kick off really, if you could tell us a bit about yourself and how you ended up joining the Army and specifically as an engineer?
Oh, joining the Army was a great thing to do, but it kind of happened by accident. I went along to meet the interview guy, and he said, "What regiment do you want to join?" I said, "Well, no idea. What regiments are there?" So he asked me what A-levels I was doing and sent me along to the Royal Artillery. I was interviewed by a very aged gentleman. I thought, that's not for me. I then went along to meet the Royal Engineers and was late for my interview, but they took pity on me and took me to a pub for the interview. And I thought, this is the job for me. And I've been in construction and property and facilities management since then.
And it's a route you'd recommend for anybody?
Oh, absolutely. I love being in the Army. There comes a point where you get rather too old for it, but fantastic opportunities, some of the biggest projects, great work and really enjoyable.
And some of the best friendships you'll ever make. You
have to rely on your colleagues and your colleagues rely on you, and that camaraderie sticks.
So let's crack on with the five, or six in this case, quick fire questions. We simply require a yes/no answer.
You're getting your value for money with six.
We are indeed. Does the current regulatory regime support the goal of delivering high quality built environment for the long term?
No, not really.
Does the approach of government departments to the built environment hinder the delivery of culture change in construction?
In some cases, yes, I'm afraid it does.
Does the built environment sector have a suitably skilled workforce to meet its long-term challenges?
No, not yet.
Yes, no, remember. Is offsite the future of the sector?
Yes.
Does BIM work for the sector as a whole?
Not for the sector as a whole, no, it doesn't.
Thank you for that. We will get back to some of those questions in a minute. I'd like to start off with the Building Safety Act, if I may, because we've recently done a survey that showed while there was an awareness of the Building Safety Act, and that's rising, it was widely ignored by industry's clients at the moment, particularly on the operational side. And many believe their responsibilities and risks can be delegated to others. Is that your experience? And do you believe that clients think this is the, shall we say, the Construction Safety Act rather than the Building Safety Act, and therefore doesn't apply to the life cycle of a building?
Listen, the Building Safety Act is a good thing. I think it's a great step forward. There's perhaps more to do. And when you introduce something new, it always takes a little while to settle. Building Safety Act, I think in this case, building means asset. This is about the safety of the asset, not the Construction Safety Act. And you always get that slight confusion with that word. I think important that it's designers, constructors, in occupation, and also refurbishment. So inevitably, it's the whole life of assets, particularly high-risk assets, and that means that clients need to take it seriously. And of course, many do. Certainly, I know that clients in government are, but it will take a while to settle, and there's probably some education there to be done.
I know we said I'd talk about the operational side, and I'll come on to that in a minute because I think there's some interesting stuff there. But Do you think the industry is growing increasingly frustrated by the amount of regulation which it thinks is hindering its ability to, was it just get on with things? So Gateway 2 is proving to be a huge bottleneck in particular. Do you think there is frustration growing across the sector?
I think there is a little bit of frustration. I'm not sure I'd say it was growing. Industry's demonstrated pretty well that it couldn't manage itself and needed government to give some guiding hand on how to do things better. So that's the first thing to recognise. And then second thing, as I mentioned before, when something is new, there's always a little bit of resistance. But I do think the Building Safety Act is a good thing. There is quite a lot of regulation, though, and I'm not sure that all of it is as aligned as it could be. And I'm not sure that the bodies responsible for assurance are necessarily as joined up as they could be. And there is potential for confusion there as the Act begins to work through and the Construction Products Regulator comes in too. I think there's an opportunity to try and be clearer about how the various bodies and the various regulation all works together so that you don't have people duplicating and doing wasted effort. But I think generally good direction of travel.
So do you think in, say, 5 years' time we'll see a tangible difference, or is it longer than that, do you think?
Oh, no, I think we will see a tangible difference, but will that be the end of the journey? I doubt it.
And is there a danger that with such a heavy focus on safety and fire safety in particular, we end up designing and constructing buildings that are safe for fire, but not necessarily the best building for people's well-being and health? But ventilation being an obvious
I mean
thing.
that's kind of my point, in that there you can find regulations about most of the important things about a building, and those have got to be joined up and brought together so that you get the best overall while still being safe. And I think the Building Safety Regulator has a real opportunity to help with that.
One example of just around government and how they are managing the estate, that the government has vowed to transform the NHS. But our healthcare infrastructure is crumbling, I'd say. Maintenance budgets are not adequate at the moment. I think last week it was reported that the backlog on maintenance now exceeds the annual estate management budget and is growing. Surely the government needs to focus on fixing this if the system has any chance of meeting the commitments to patients and staff.
Yeah, listen, that's a real concern, not just in the health sector, but also for prisons and lots of other asset types. I think all big clients struggle with capital projects on one hand and operations on the other, and joining the two up. I think it's common for there to be different teams and different supply chains that supports new works and operations and maintenance. And that's, you might say that's the client's fault, but it kind of isn't. It's more to do with that's the way the industry's set up. And so clients have to respond in that way. And that can mean left hand doesn't know what right hand's doing. And it should be possible to use lots of the good work that's been seen on capital projects over the last, say, 10 or 15 years and carry that forward into operations and maintenance. There are various reasons why that is a challenge, but it's not an undoable thing. It should be a doable thing. And taking a whole life, whole estate view about the health estate, for instance, could make a real difference. And I personally think you could end up spending less money and getting a better result.
One of the areas you're focusing on now is that transition between construction and operation. And certainly our members see this throughout, the lack of commissioning, the complex way in which we hand over buildings and the data, and the clients not knowing what they need, so they ask for everything. The whole thing is a bit of a mess all the way through. Can you tell us a bit about the work you've been doing to try and improve that, and particularly when you were at the Government Property Agency?
It is a little bit of a mess. When I first encountered different approaches in construction and facilities management, 10 years plus ago, I was amazed that they were different. I said, well, we'll just change this. We'll just sort it out. Why can't we do it? Oh, no, don't touch that because it's just too difficult. Well, that kind of red rag to a bull. And so made some good progress on that. Firstly, when I was with HMRC, and then more latterly with the Government Property Agency, to try and work with the various data classification and data standards groups to get some kind of alignment. So the data that is generated during design and construction, which is generally pretty good, is not completely lost at handover. And whilst lots of that information is gathered and there's lots of work done on handover, A few months after the handover, normally a great deal of that has been lost, which is such a shame and such a waste of money, and means that having a genuine whole life perspective is really quite a challenge. So breaking that glass ceiling is something that I'm passionate about, and I think is very doable. And I hope that we can see some progress on that shortly. Because if you can do that, then that not only means that you're delivering more efficiently through the life of an asset, but it starts to address some of the problems you were talking about before, where you've got a discontinuity between construction and operations. If you can make that handover work smoothly, then that helps to bring the two together, and you get a more joined up view across the whole estate and all the money you're spending, because currently there tend to be different buckets of you spending this on operations and this on capital works. And government, like any organization, capital works are sexy, aren't they? Big shiny new thing that looks good, whereas operations not quite as attractive, say. But both of them are important, and if you don't look after your assets through its life, which might be 30, 50 longer years, then that will come back to bite you, not just in a very big backlog maintenance bill, but also safety issues, well-being issues, health issues, general staff and employee and patient satisfaction. That's not a sensible thing to do.
Do we need a new term other than maintenance? Because if you maintain something and it's working in the way it's always worked, which kind of says, well, if I don't do it, it's still working, I've maintained it.
Maintenance is important, and I'm not sure I'd start running around trying to change the name there, but I don't think it's enough. You need a broader approach, looking at how the whole asset can be sustained over time, and that includes replacing parts of the assets and upgrading parts of the assets from time to time on a life cycle basis. And life cycle planning tends to be very weak, weaker than maintenance. And importantly today, not just is life cycle important, but taking those opportunities to upgrade facilities so they're more carbon efficient, carbon net zero interventions too, joining life cycle and carbon net zero interventions together, that's an increasingly important part of a asset's life.
We're filming this or recording this the day after Storm Bert has just gone through and paralysing much of the West Coast rail line, or certainly from the West Country. It's a growing challenge of having to adopt our existing building stock so that it's actually able to cope with temperature fluctuations, flooding, and increasingly air pollution. Is this, do you think, on building managers' radars?
It's definitely on building managers' radars, and it's definitely on asset managers' radars. I think part of the challenge for them is this all sounds really difficult. Where should I start? Looks expensive. How could I do it? But I think, getting to a complete net zero building is really difficult, perhaps even impossible. But doing some things that will make a difference, you can start tomorrow, reasonably low cost with short payback times. So getting started on the easy things, whether it's lighting or lighting controls, whether it's PV or insulation, those things are quite straightforward to do before you start getting sucked into the important challenges of removing fossil fuels from a building. And then, as you point out, there's the challenge of mitigation of the effects of an increased of climate change. So it will be hotter. It will be wetter from time to time. What are you going to do about that? Adjusting the duty points on your cooling, for instance, choosing a better cooling system, shading your building, better insulation are all things that can be done from a temperature point of view. And then from a flood mitigation point of view, well, don't have a building in the floodplain. That would be a good start. If you're in a place where it might flood, well, do you have to have all your important stuff on the ground floor? Maybe move the expensive things up a bit. So if you do flood, well, you don't want to, but at least make the recovery from that as pain-free as it can possibly be.
We talked a little bit about BIM particularly, but digital construction tools in particular, how can they be used to help us develop and design and build better buildings than we currently do? And what do you think is not happening that should happen in that area?
For me, it's about bringing together data. So there's lots and lots of data collected, huge amounts of data collected in new construction, and probably even more collected in operations. But quite often it's in silos. Sometimes it's in proprietary software and it's difficult to bring together. So adopting an open and interoperable approach, bringing data together so that it can support decision making. That's a sort of technical challenge that's certainly very doable. But then there's also a leadership challenge of, well, what do you want to achieve? What's important? What are your priorities? And once it's clear what the desired outcomes are, then structuring that data so it can answer those questions, help you make decisions faster, better, so that you can spend less, emit less carbon, have more satisfied employees. All those things sound expensive. Actually, I think in lots of cases, it's really quite possible to do all of those things for less cost if you're making decisions on the basis of hard evidence rather than supposition.
Do you think, we're going to link this to the Building Safety Act, so the problems at the moment of a bottleneck at Gateway 2, but do you think longer term that will help BIM in particular, in that currently we very quickly migrate into build and design? Will this force us to go into design and build in a true sense, which would then open us up to more offsite?
It might help. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. We'll see what the workload looks like with everybody having to have their proposals checked. But for me, going back to my particular passion, there's possibly more to do with when you're moving into operations. Do you then have the information necessary? And I'm really pleased to see the whole life information management that's in the BSA, particularly the safety golden thread. But I think it applies to everything. Gather the right information during design and construction, carry that through into operations, and use that to make the building more successful over its lifetime. And importantly, when you refurbish things, that's got to modify and update things. And I think there's not been enough focus on refurbishment in the past. I think that will change. A lot of the buildings, I think it's 80% of the buildings we have today will still be in use in 2050. So that means there'll be quite a bit of refit and refurbishment between now and then. And I think the industry needs to do more to move away from design and construction, full stop, new paragraph, operations. That needs to be more of a continuity, and recognise that there are quite major projects in refurbishments that take place during the life of an asset. There are lots of parts of the industry that could respond to that. One of my favourite ones is REBA. Their plan of work is great. Lots of people use it. 6 stages during a new project, during capital construction. 1 stage during operations. Well, not even operations and refurbishment, not even 2 stages. Come on, guys. If you're listening out of REBA, let's have an additional stage, at least one more.
Good point. Just one point on offsite, which we mentioned at the very beginning. And there's been a lot of talk about, and also some very high-profile failures in that area, mainly because of the cyclic nature of demand. But is it really the future of the built environment, do you think, and are there limitations?
I'd challenge the language a little bit. On-site, off-site is a little bit binary. I think we should have a little bit more of a assembly line mentality, thinking about how you start with raw materials and they get integrated to create products, and then those products are integrated to create components, and those you see my direction of travel. If you went back to the medieval times, raw materials came to site. They were all integrated on the site to produce a building. The 20th century approaches, I think cathedral builders would recognise that still a lot of raw materials coming to site, some products coming to site where materials have been pre-integrated, but still a lot of work is done on site. I think there will be more work done off-site, but not necessarily in a single off-site place, in multiple off-site places, to create a assembly line where raw materials and products are iteratively integrated so that there is less raw materials coming to site. And perhaps that should be a challenge. How little raw materials can you have coming to site so that you're bringing pre-integrated products and assemblies to site where they can be brought together? Putting things together in the pouring rain in November is not a good idea.
Buildings are becoming more and more complex to build and to maintain. We talked a bit about the skill sets required for that. What do you think the long-term, particularly on the engineering services side, what do you think the skill sets that people will require to be able to Let's talk about the maintenance of these buildings, the operation.
There's green skills to start with. I think that there's a general need to understand better where carbon is embodied and where carbon is used. So I think that applies to the whole industry. But I think if you look at operations in particular, facilities management, asset management, then there is a big step up required in digital skills. If you look at it in the round, somewhere behind where design and construction is, that needs to catch up. And that would be a big step towards having a more whole life perspective. It's not that people in FM or operations don't want to do that. I mean, they do, but there's work to be done to help that, not just their education and training, but also the software platforms that support that area of the sector are not always suitable for taking a proper whole life digital approach. And then there's also that glass ceiling I mentioned before, which takes place at practical completion, which we need to smash through.
And do you see the fragmentation of the industry as a problem to getting that holistic approach to?
Yeah, for sure. The industry is fragmented, far too fragmented. And, I can't wave a magic wand over that. I was looking at some of the consultation that had been done to support the Building Safety Act. And that's led to the creation of 13 sector-led groups. So, there's 13 different sectors. But the consultation also took place with over 60 professional institutions and associations. That just seems like an awful lot. I suppose my view is, whilst some reduction in the number of different bodies will be good, that might not happen quickly. So I'm keen on more collaboration between those bodies where that's possible. And I think there's lots of scope for that. And then also, my interest in data is kind of the back door to that. If you can get everybody using an end-to-end data set that's a single version of the truth, then that makes collaboration easy. And the fact that the different organizations are fragmented is perhaps less important. Might lead to some more integration between those organizations, but that's, from my point of view, not the main aim. It's getting the whole sector to be more productive. And I think there's a lot of scope to be more productive.
And that's a great segue into the work you've been doing recently around the FM Alliance. Could you tell us a little bit about what that work is and what your hopes are for it?
Yeah, so I don't want to go too far on that because the bodies involved have not agreed to anything at the moment, but they have demonstrated in a number of projects over years, ones that I've been responsible for and others, that the data can be better aligned, and that when it is better aligned, everything works better. And we've seen iterative improvements across a number of areas. And now there's talk about, could that way of working be formalized and people agree to collaborate in an extended way over time? And that can only be a good thing. And here we're talking about a genuine whole life approach. So the data classifications and data standards that are used in design and construction, and those that are used in operations, lifecycle replacement, and also whole life carbon. If all of those things can be brought together with cost, what a lot of time would be saved, just wasted effort in mapping and changing and recalculating. And misunderstandings would be a lot less. So why not do that? And I'm hopeful that those organizations will continue to work together and that we might achieve some agreement that say, look, we're going to sign up to working together in the long term. So we'll keep working on that, and perhaps we'll achieve something. Watch this space.
So, Stephen, you and I have both been through the transition from a military background into civilian work. What struck you most when you came out? I think your last job was managing Camp Bastion.
No, my last job was I was head of the Army Estate, Director of Infrastructure for the Army. The Camp Bastion thing keeps coming back, which was quite a long time ago now. But to be honest, I don't mind it coming back. That was just such a fantastic job. Go and build me a small town. How long have I got? Not very long. How much money have you got? How much do you need? Get on with it. That was a brilliant job. Everything from obviously accommodation, headquarters and communications, that goes without saying, but we built an international standard airfield, we built a heliport, 2 hospitals, all sorts of facilities. Water supply being the most challenging. Helmand is one of the driest places on earth, and securing water from deep wells was a real challenge, and one that fortunately for my future career came good.
I mean, a fascinating story. So you came out of that where you tell people, you give them an order, effectively, I think is a bit of a misnomer that
Yes.
people, obey orders in the way
Yeah.
that I think people perceive of the military. But you come out of that into the civilian world and you tell someone to do something and then you go, sorry, you didn't do it? Why not? How did you adapt to that?
Yeah, so it's definitely, as you know, not as it's portrayed. And I think people these days, with there's comparatively few people serving in the forces, gain their impression of what it might be like from Hollywood films, which are not even a good representation of what happens in the US Army, never mind in the British Army. And for us, as you know, this is the thing I'd like you to do, not this is how I'm going to tell you how to do it, just go away and do it. So if you take Camp Bastion for a moment, and you might say that the Permanent Joint Headquarters doesn't have a lot of expertise in construction, but even putting that to one side, there are some great people in that organisation. No one told me what to do. Just go away and do it.
Yes, I think it's a popular misconception.
And I will pass on the same thing to my team, hopefully. Yes, come back if you need a bit of help, but
empower them to do
go away and do it.
Final question. Are you optimistic about the future or are you pessimistic about the future?
I am optimistic. I am definitely a glass half full person. I always think it's possible to do things that other people say maybe it's not. It might take a little bit longer than you would like, but I am optimistic, yes.
And this is an unfair question because I haven't prepared you for this at all, but if you were able to do one thing that would make a difference, what would that be?
I'm on joining up the data. I'm definitely joining up the data. And then once you've done that, you can exploit that data and you can realize some real productivity benefits. And we could do that quickly with the right will.
Stephen Boyd, thank you once again for joining us today.
Thank you, David.
And now on to the podcast news. The long-awaited and much-anticipated revised version of DW145 is now available and free for BESA members, as are all BESA publications from now on. The revised DW145, the installation of fire dampers and smoke dampers, represents a crucial step forward in fire safety standards, addressing the urgent need for compliance and competence highlighted by the Building Safety Act. This updated guidance ensures contractors can meet the highest standards in design, installation and inspection while emphasising critical aspects such as penetration seals, accessibility for maintenance, and robust evidence of compliance. To help you and your colleagues understand the changes of the revised DW145 guidance, BESA Academy has developed an online 45-minute fire and smoke damper course, which is discounted for BESA members or included at no extra cost when non-members purchase the revised DW145. Visit the BESA publication store to access your copy today. Evidencing individual competence is a requirement of the Building Safety Act, and BESA Academy provides a vast range of online courses, free CPD and in-person short courses via our approved Academy training centres across the UK. New for this month, 2 online IOSH courses, Safety for Executives and Directors and Managing Safety. Upskill for free with our fully funded heat network courses, foundation and installation and maintenance, with spaces filling up fast, so secure your spot now. Plus a range of business support e-learning. Please visit the BESA Academy and register for your free account. Stephen Boyd was recently the keynote speaker for SFG20's virtual summit. SFG20 is the industry standard for building maintenance asset specification, and BESA was proud to sponsor their summit this month. I provided an update to the Building Safety Act 2 years on, and our Director of Specialist Knowledge, Rachel Davison, was part of an expert panel discussion on the Building Safety Act. Other sessions covered carbon net zero, digital-led maintenance, AI, and much more. All sessions were recorded and are available online for 12 months. So if you work in FM, register online to access hours of CPD content now at sfg20.co.uk. Thank you for tuning into Behind the Built Environment. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for more in-depth conversations with industry leaders. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review and share with your colleagues. Stay connected with BESA for the latest updates and insights into our industry. Until next time, I'm David Frise, and this has been Behind the Built Environment. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to Behind the Built Environment podcast from BESA. If you like what you heard today, then please follow and rate us on your favourite podcast app. Come and join us over on LinkedIn, BESA Group, and carry on the conversation. And if you want to find out more about joining the BESA community, then please visit thebesa.com to start your journey with us today.